Christopher, welcome to the Content 10X podcast.
Thank you for having me.
It's really good to have you here, and I'm very, very excited about this conversation. So the Content 10X podcast, it's all about repurposing and maximizing content. And we talk about how to be smart and creative and strategic with content. And in April, you shared a really, really interesting video, newsletter, blog post, podcast that took my attention. There was amazing repurposing going on there for what you did, which I'm going to come on to later. But it was a fantastic piece of content that you shared about generative AI optimization and content marketing strategy. And that's what I would really love to talk to you about today. And there were two things that you said that really jumped out at me. I guess as the owner of an agency that helps companies with expanding reach and expanding their content. So you said that those who are better at content marketing will do better in the Gen AI search world. And specifically, you said that best isn't enough and most isn't enough. You have to create the most best content in your space. Super interesting. And I really want to dig into that and hear more of your ideas on that. But firstly, when we talk about generative AI, and search as content marketers, what do we mean by that? So Gen AI search.
So generative AI search refers to search engines either that use language models to cull through and summarize results or just outright summarize. So probably one of the best known companies in that space is a company called Perplexity. They make an AI-powered search engine, which takes search data and distills it down into very nice AI summaries. This was a bit of a niche until Google at Google I/O said that search generative experiments, which have been in beta for about a year now, would be in production, and they renamed this AI Answers. So when you enter certain types of searches, mostly information queries, into Google now, the top third of the screen or 2/3 of the screen, the first screen itself, depending on the size of window you're using, is a summarized AI answer that distills down all of the results into a helpful summary. This obviously has a massive impact on search listings, because if the user is asking an information query and the AI summary is satisfactory, that click, the underlying sites never get the click. They never get any kind of traffic, and their data is being used essentially to feed Google's satisfying answer and possibly the ads that appear alongside it without ever getting any benefit. And there's kind of been this Faustian bargain with Google for the last 25 years. We make content and make it available to you, and you send us traffic. And the AI equation changes that, which is now we make content and you give us nothing. Another aspect of this is people using generative tools, particularly tools like ChatGPT, for example, using them as search engines, even though that's not what they're designed for. People use that because they get satisfying answers, even when the answer isn't right. Right? People prefer a convenient wrong answer to an inconvenient right answer. This is the nature of human beings. And so this obviously poses a lot of issues. The World Economic Forum recently cited that generative AI is the #1 source of disinformation now, because the models have been, will attempt to be helpful, attempt to be harmless, and as a result, sacrifice truthful, which is a bit problematic. And so that's sort of a very quick look at the generative AI landscape in terms of how people are using it to find information.
And have you found that traffic is significantly down on, quite a lot of sites that would have depended on quite a lot of search traffic at the moment, because people in quite large volumes, as you say, are going to the tools like Perplexity and sites like that they would have just previously asked Google, and we're seeing quite a significant drop in traffic.
It depends on the site, and it depends on their search footprint. So sites that have a lot of branded search are seeing very little impact, because at least for AI answers, that's not being triggered. And that makes sense if you think about it. If someone searches for Trust Insights, they're probably not looking for information. It's an intent query. They want to go to that site to contact us to do something. So branded search seems to be okay for now. In unbranded search, informational queries seem to be the most impacted. So people like, what's a what's a good email marketing strategy, things like that. Those informational queries are being impacted, and the numbers vary based on who you talk to. The Wall Street Journal had a piece recently saying 20 to 40% of unbranded organic search is being eaten. Search Engine Journal was saying up to 60%. SEO Clarity was saying, it depends on the query type, but unbranded search is the area that is having the biggest adverse impact from all these different AI summarization tools.
Right, I see. So we'd like generative AI to know about us for people who are creating content marketing's sake, because we want to share valuable information with people, but ultimately we want them to know us as the authority, the trusted authority, and want to work with us. So we want generative AI to know about us and to be telling people when they ask questions that we're the authority and things like that. So the big question you have is, how do we therefore train these tools? How do we train these robots so that they're trained to reference us? And I know when I watched the video that you were talking about this and read the newsletter, you were talking about the 3 sources of data that the generative AI tools draw information from and how you can influence those. Could you explain a bit more about that? So where the data comes from and the influence that we can have on that?
It depends on the company and the model. And so to back up a bit, folks need to understand first that what's inside a generative AI model is nothing more than a collection of statistics. So pieces of words are broken up and turned into numbers. And then those numbers are essentially statistically correlated with each other individually as in groups. So words, phrases, sentences, paragraphs, documents are all turned into essentially what are called parameters, which are statistical relationships. So if I say, God save the, right? The next word is probably going to be king or queen. The next word is probably not going to be avocado, right? Because you have seen it so many times that there is a statistical association between those phrases, those individual components of a piece of text. That's what's in a model. You need to know that because when these models are trained, they are trained on very large data sets. One is called Common Crawl, which is a nonprofit that scrapes the public web and makes that data available to anyone who wants it. If you have a computer that can handle 6.5 petabytes of data, which is about 1,000 high-end laptop hard drives. That's just to give you a sense of how much data that is. Then that's part of what goes into a lot of the training, so that these tools start to understand what word belongs next to another word. Other data sets that people use frequently are things like YouTube. YouTube data is used extensively, plus programming sites like Stack Overflow and GitHub. There's so much data. Companies are licensing data from companies like Reddit and the New York Times, et cetera, to bring in high quality data. And then the companies have their own data. So Google obviously has this entire search index to rely on, plus the contents of Gmail, plus the contents of YouTube, plus the contents of all the things that Google owns. Meta has the contents of Facebook and Instagram and WhatsApp and so on and so forth, all the properties that they own. That's how these models are built. They're built from these very large sets of data. Any one company is going to have a minuscule portion of that, entire training library, but the way these models work is they invoke probabilities. So if I talk about content marketing, it's not going to try and pull all the content references from its statistical database. It's going to pull the ones that are statistically most probable to be related to that. And that means that if I have done a good job of creating ridiculous amounts of high quality content, like hundreds of YouTube videos and hundreds of newsletters and hundreds of books and publications and white papers and so on and so forth, then in these databases, I probably have a statistically strong relationship with that term or concept. And so that's how these things work, which means that you as a marketer want your company or your brand or even your name to be associated with stuff. You have to have, as I said in the newsletter article, the most best content about that. So if I want Trust Insights to be known for artificial intelligence and machine learning and management consulting and all these terms, I need to have a lot of content that has that information in it. And That's part of the reason why we have our Thursday live stream, because that's like an hour of content a week. And of course, the captions files are part of that. So we have a podcast that we load to YouTube as well. That's why I put up videos daily on my personal YouTube channel, plus a weekly newsletter that's also turned into a video, that's also turned into a podcast. And those podcasts have captions files and stuff. So we're trying to create a body of work that is hundreds or thousands of pieces of rich content in multiple formats in as many places as possible, so that when someone invokes the name Trust Insights, there's a statistical association with that. But then if somebody invokes AI consulting, I want there to be a statistical relationship between AI consulting and Trust Insights as well. Even now, at this very moment, we are doing exactly that. You've noticed not to be a jerk, but I've mentioned my company name with this topic a whole bunch of times. Why? It's not just because I'm an egotistical maniac. It's because I know that this podcast, this video, will become text at some point, transcription and stuff like that, and that will find its way onto the web. And that will in turn find its way into these training libraries at some point. So I need to make sure that I'm creating those statistical associations. That's just part of how I create content.
I've got so many things to ask you about that. So firstly, I know you said that it's that, it's that conversion of the content to text. So things like the videos that go onto YouTube get transcribed in the back end, and then that's all this written text, and podcasts will go onto the key podcast apps. They'll get transcribed. We've got the text. You're putting the content out onto your site and onto other platforms as well, Substack, LinkedIn, etc. So from a repurposing angle, it sounds like what a great thing to do in terms of create video at the top of the pyramid, have different places for the video to go where that it will be get transcribed, etc., and then create content from it. First thing I wondered is, when you go back to the old days of talking about traditional SEO and people being concerned about duplicate content and things like that. So when you're, say, having maybe the same-ish with some nuances version of a transcription from the same video in the back end of YouTube and in the back end of Google Podcasts and on your site and in these different places, and it's the same content, the same transcription, really, is it like still a bonus to the generative AI because it's just the volume of being fed that information, or does it pick up that, okay, I think we've got this one, we've got this covered, we picked this up from YouTube last week?
So the concept of a duplicate content penalty only applies to legacy search engines. Generative AI, that is not true. There is a lot of duplication, and there are some naive attempts to try and deduplicate the database, depending on, again, which company and which model you're talking about. But by and large, that's not the case, because believe it or not, there actually are machine learning techniques for when you're building a generative AI model called upsampling, where you essentially repeat high quality data over and over again to make up for the fact that you may not have a lot of data for that space. And so generative AI model makers don't do duplicate content penalization. In fact, they kind of like it.
So it's just more and more affirmation and more information to feed the machine, so to speak. So if that's the case, then are we going to run into the situation where there'll be, people selling services of, we'll just take your content and then just duplicate it on all of these, like the old SEO practices of all these made up sites and things like that, where we'll just like have it all these different places because AI doesn't care and it's just 100 instances of the same thing? So do you see that coming up as something that we'll start to see?
Definitely. Yeah. And that will be the case in the short term until model makers pivot the approach that they use to create models. And we're already seeing that to some degree. The models made by Mistral, the French company, seem to perform better than their peers for the same size because they have a more refined training data set. They have a much more curated data set where they're trying to do, let's do some level of deduplication, but let's focus on high quality, sites. So you're looking at, someone's corporate website versus, Drunk Uncle Fred's blogspot blog, right? They rate those differently. Looking at things like linguistic characteristics that might indicate quality of text, like what grade level is it written at, and things like that. Very, very low compute methods because you have enormous amounts of text to trawl through. So there is some of that happening, but for the biggest models, like ChatGPT's underlying model, they're still a volume play. And in fact, one interesting thing that I've noticed is ChatGPT has a very strong awareness of YouTube content, and it turned out later in interviews, yeah, they've been scraping and training on YouTube data just because they need more data for the multimodal models, to the point where if you've got a good body of work on YouTube, the model may inherently know about you. They have this one model called Whisper that does transcription, and when I load an audio file from my weekly videos in there, it will insert my name at the front, says Christopher Penn, and so on and so forth. And I'm like, my name's not in. I don't say my name in my videos to start off. How does it know that? Well, it knows that because it's what's in the captions files that I've provided in the past. And so this model has seen so much of my content, of the 1,200 videos I've put up on YouTube, that it recognizes my voice and auto annotates me. I'm like, so this is going to be interesting if anyone has a similar style of speaking, they're going to get my name as free advertising in your transcriptions. But that's an example of having that huge body of work in these big public repositories will help boost models' awareness of who you are.
It's really interesting. I mean, when you said about YouTube, I was thinking about how, the clients that we work with, so we're helping them take videos and repurpose them into social content and LinkedIn content and blog posts and things like that. And we'll always go through what platforms are important to you and who's your audience on there, and make sure that the repurposing plan is aligned for them. Quite often clients might say to us, especially like the B2B tech companies and things like that, no, we don't want the content going onto YouTube. We don't really do much with our YouTube channel, and we'll just keep it to the site and to LinkedIn, and that's where we'll focus. But it really got me to thinking about how that's a missed opportunity, because if you've just got this long form piece of video content, then even if you aren't trying to grow your YouTube channel and you don't have a particular YouTube strategy, would it be right to say, though, it's free to put that on YouTube? You've got a channel, it's a load of video content that will be turned into text in the back end. And if you do it well, like you said, you reference yourself, you say what you're about and how you can help people and things like that, it's going to help you with something you may never have considered before, which is the fact that you feed in the tools that your audience use from a Gen AI perspective.
Yeah, I mean, this is not different than traditional PR strategy in some ways, except that we care less about quality. Be everywhere that you can be, because different companies train off of different data sets. So for example, ByteDance, which is the owner of TikTok, does train off, builds models off of that. So if you want to, particularly if you're like a multinational company and you want to show up in a database in models like Qwen or Yi, which are some of the Chinese models, if you do business multinationally and you have companies that use these models, guess what? You want to have your data in a data repository that is scraped and trained off of that data. So yes, you should. You could be a legacy B2B that makes ball bearings. Yes, you should be on TikTok. Yes, you should be on YouTube and Instagram. And the answer is yes. If your social media management tool allows you to post to it, the answer is yes, you should be posting there. You should be posting on Pinterest. You should be posting wherever, because all of the social companies have realized that they are sitting on a gold mine of training data. So they are looking to license it and sell it as quickly as possible. PhotoBucket, the early 2000s photo sharing site, is making bank now selling annotated image data sets to AI companies. It's like they were the second largest revenue stream now. And if you happen to be one of those folks, your MySpace page used PhotoBucket and stuff, guess what? Your legacy training data is now showing, going to be fed to models. So obviously there's, for people who are creators, artists and stuff like that, this is a big problem, right? Because essentially their works are being leveraged. And I will take a sidebar to say, with your permission, because you signed the terms of service that said that companies can do this. So you can't protest. However, for a company, a brand, like, yeah, we want people to know about us. There is no reason not to distribute your stuff as widely as possible.
What you said about wanting people to know about you, it's something that's always frustrated me a little bit about some of the AI tools is when I ask questions that we have been providing answers to for the last 7 or 8 years. So anything generally to do with repurposing content, things like that, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of blog posts and podcast episodes and things like that. So a lot of the AI tools you can see have got a lot of the information from our site and our content. That's quite obvious because we'll ask questions and I'll literally be reading my own. ChatGPT will be saying my phrases and I could literally have written that apart from it being robotic, and it's pretty obvious that it's not just drawn from us. I'm not saying I'm the only person who's spoken about it, but when similar to you, when you've created so much content about one thing, of course, the tools have ingested that. And it kind of annoys you when you think that all these people are asking these questions and they're getting answers that actually I provided, but have now been put into AI and are coming at them. And wouldn't it be great if there was just some way that we could insert ourselves into that, like, you know, like with Perplexity, like just cite the blog post that it came from and it's one of ours, or mention like a quote from like one of the podcasts or transcripts that comes from us. And I know that you just mentioned it already in saying that you're here on a podcast and this is information and data that's out there with you, your name. And so, like, quite rightly so, you know, mention your company, mention what you do. Why would you not take that opportunity? And so that's something that you can do when you guest on other people's content. And then with your own, I know you've mentioned about things like just having a standard like blurb in the end of your blog posts and your articles and things like that to repeatedly say, you know, who you are, what you do, like things like that, what you want. If you're going to be referenced, then how do you control that it is coming from you and that they know it's picking up from you? Are there any other tips that you have for that? So just making sure that all this information that you put out there can be linked to you and can benefit you in some way, like so that you do, you know, you don't pull your hair out and see all this value doesn't come back to you at all.
Pick your brand and everything. So there's a reason, like the Trust Insights podcast starts out with me yelling, like literally yelling out loud every week. In this week's In-Ear Insights, you're going to learn about X, right? And I will reference my co-founder and CEO, Katie Robert, frequently and stuff as well. It's about brand, right? Brand is the number one thing that every marketer should be focusing on today because, one, it is how you get AI to know who you are and what is your content, right? So you'll notice we talk about things, we link things and create stuff. We create a lot of branded stuff, the Trust Insights Pair Framework, the Trust Insights Race Framework, blah, 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 right? You know, the all creating stuff that is heavily branded. Two, it creates recall. People, when we want them to remember, oh, who who should I talk to at AI Consulting? I know, I'll Google for Trust Insights. That will sidestep around the AI summarization because now it's a branded query, right? So the brand power turns into branded queries. It sidesteps some of the AI. And three, it creates those statistical associations, you know, across different data sets and different channels and things. Brand is so important. And it's especially important now for companies that have not traditionally focused a lot on brand. Like, yeah, you know, Acme ball bearing manufacturing company maybe like, well, what do we need a strong brand for? We sell really good quality ball bearings. Well, the reality is you need to have a brand that your customers recognize and remember and are willing to communicate with directly. So the sort of the three pillars are: make sure you have a good brand, make sure that you have a direct channel to your audience. So you've read my newsletter, right? That newsletter exists. That newsletter has been my life insurance policy for so many years, right? I started my newsletter in 2007, and it has been a labor of love for, you know, a decade and a half now, but it has gotten me jobs, right? It was the jump starter to when Kate and I founded Trust Insights. We did not start the company cold, right? We had, at that time, my mailing was close to 60,000 people. So when you launch the company and you have a mailing list of 60,000, it's a lot easier to launch a company. But today, it's also a form of reliable reach because social media is heavily intermediated by AI, right? You have no idea if a social post is going to be seen at all or when. Like, oh, look, Threads necroed my post from 2 weeks ago to show to people. Like that's helpful. Search is now even more heavily mediated by AI with AI answers and things like that. And so those two channels that people spend a lot of time on, there's someone else's AI in the way between you and the customer. An email newsletter, a text messaging, a texting list, even direct mail, like paper direct mail, you at least know the content's going to get there, and you have a pretty good sense of when it'll be. Like, yeah, the post will put it in the mailbox, 7 days from now. Those channels that are direct to consumer, direct to audience channels are so important. They need to be the second pillar of your strategy in an AI world. And the third one is have a community of some kind that is not intermediated by AI. So we have the Analytics for Marketers Slack group. Today, if I was starting over, I would 100% be building my community on Discord, because Discord is one of the best places to build community. It is relatively low cost, and there's no AI in the way. It's basically, for those folks who have hair color like I do, it's like the old AOL chat rooms from the early 2000s. That's basically what Discord is. So brand, direct communication, and community are the three pillars that every marketer should be focusing on right now.
So really, as well, just if you're going to get in front of people via social, etc., get them to the channels where you can cut the AI aspect out, like you said, the community, etc., so you can control the narrative and the conversation, be more in front of them, which makes sense. When we talk about SEO, and obviously you've mentioned about the SEO tools, the AI aspect built in and just providing answers in snippets so people don't end up clicking anywhere anymore. Well, I know that you also said that with the Gen AI tools, one aspect of how they find information, as well as the data that it's kind of fed, and also the prompts and things like that we give it, that it learns from as well. Well, then there's also the fact that some of them do actually use search engines. And I think you mentioned Bing, didn't you, as being one of the main search engines that some of the key Gen AI tools use. So like, if people are thinking, I should be spending a bit more time focusing on how I can get noticed with the generative AI tools as opposed to search these days, SEO's dead, that kind of thing that people say. Well, that's obviously not true at all, is it? Because traditional SEO, people do still use search engines and even the AI tools. Would it be fair to say the AI tools also depend on people being good at traditional SEO for that aspect of how it gathers data?
Yeah, to a degree, because the search engines provide things like rankings for retrieve and rank functions, and not like I'm number one in the listings. No, but actually in terms of the relevance to a query. When you watch behind the scenes, you watch like how Bing constructs its queries and stuff. Bing interprets a amount of data from whatever long paragraph you've typed in, same for Perplexity, parses it into search queries, hits up the search index, pulls back the data, and then summarizes the data it's pulled back. So you still need to be in those search catalogs. The nice thing about having a solid content strategy that is multi-channel and multimodal is that by default, will probably also do reasonably well in search results as well, right? If you are getting people to share stuff and read stuff and consume stuff, if you're getting people to, you're posting your content in places and getting engagement on it, those are all bits and pieces that flow into search algorithms. And we saw from about a couple of weeks ago, Rand Fishkin's gigantic Google Leaks thing, where the contents of the Google Content Warehouse API were shared publicly. That there's like 2,500 different attributes in that API, thousands of ranking factors. And by dissecting that API's contents with generative AI, you can see like all the different things, the little components that make up how Google in particular understands content and makes it available to its different services. That Content Warehouse API unsurprisingly feeds things like Google Search, right, which now has AI answers. So if you are doing what the big tech companies say you should do to please their algorithm systems, you will show up better. So it's really imperative that people understand that SEO, as most people have understood it, and a lot of people have this sort of frozen idea of SEO from like the early 2000s that hasn't been true in decades. But if you were doing SEO well in the last 10 years or the last 5 years, you're probably still doing okay with it. And as long as you're keeping up with how it's changing and testing constantly and staying in tune with the industry, then as it pivots towards the use of AI more and more, generative AI in particular, you'll still do well.
And with Bing versus good old Google, is it Perplexity and ChatGPT in particular that are based more off Bing than Google?
So ChatGPT uses Bing because OpenAI has a substantial partnership with Microsoft. Perplexity, we don't know who the underlying APIs are.
Given that OpenAI is Bing and a lot of Gen AI is based off that, then it's probably it's important to make sure that you're factoring in Bing's tools in terms of assessing your SEO rankings.
Oh yeah,
yeah.
I
okay.
mean, you would have to be foolish not to be looking as much at Bing Webmaster Tools as you are Google Search Console. There's no reason not to look at both.
No, makes sense. When it comes to your content, and I mentioned at the start, but you're great at repurposing content. And just to attribute as well, so it was Anne Handley's newsletter that mentioned your article about generative AI and content strategy, went straight over to it. I'm watching a video of you sharing this awesome information, but the video was in a Substack newsletter. So you've got the video, you've got the Substack newsletter. The video is also on YouTube, and I can see the content's also on your website. And then you have got the audio as an audio file, and also I can see that you share you're using Libsyn, and that's on the podcast apps as well. And I think you mentioned that as well as the newsletter being on Substack, it's also on LinkedIn, right, as well. You are taking this content and spreading it really far, and you've explained all the reasons why. Is there anything else you do, just out of curiosity? If I explained most of that repurposing journey, or have I missed more of it?
No, that's currently the framework for right now. I'm looking at some AI tools to atomize it more so that I can do more short form stuff on TikTok and Instagram. That's sort of the next phase, if you will. Just again, attention is kind of like, foraging for berries. Like, you've got to pick whatever you can, wherever you can, and bring it back to be useful. Because all these big tech companies, for good or ill, they have the audience and the attention, and we need to, we have a fiduciary responsibility as marketers to extract as much value from those big tech companies as we possibly can, because if we let them hold on to all the attention, we basically just have to hand them our credit cards and hope that, their algorithms favor us. That is a poor long-term strategy. And so anything that a marketer can do to look at how distribution works, to go different places. I'm no kidding. I'm actually working on an upcoming version of the newsletter. I'm trying to go through the process of setting up an OnlyFans account just so I can see what's on that platform, right? There's Patreon, there's Fansly, there's all these different places that have all this attention. And, my former high school colleague, Gary Vaynerchuk, was a year behind me in high school, very often says attention is the currency of commerce today, right? So where is the attention, right? It is on YouTube. It is on TikTok. It is on, name your poison. You've got to be in the places where eyeballs are, because the old idea from content marketing and inbound marketing of, build it and they will come. That is gone. It's been gone for a while, but it's really gone now.
Yeah, agreed. I get frustrated when I hear people who were saying that a long time ago still saying it, and you're like, I think you need to move on from that. So one last question. I'm very conscious of time. So we were talking actually before we hit record about meeting at Content Marketing World and the world of content marketing and B2B marketers. And quite a few people are still quite intimidated and quite cautious about AI and still aren't really jumping into this world and truly understanding it because they're quite worried by it, I think. What would you say is just maybe for a typical B2B marketer in an organization who's now had the senior people saying, we can't sort of just play around with this anymore. I need you to start really coming up with a bit of a plan for what we're doing in a marketing team from an AI perspective. Where would you say would be like just a good place to maybe get started with looking at AI B2B marketing?
Unsurprisingly, we have a framework for that. It's the Trust Insights 5P framework: purpose, people, process, platform, performance. So What is the purpose you're trying to achieve? Not with AI, but what is the business purpose that you want to achieve? Do you want more eyeballs? Do you want more audience? Do you want more, marketing qualified leads? What is the purpose? Who are the people who are involved in it, and what is their skill sets and background? And by the way, we do this audit as a paid service. What are the processes you have in place today to do that? What are the best practices in the marketplace to do that? How are they different between the two, right? Then what is the outcome, the performance, right? How are you measuring success? If you say awareness is your goal, but you're measuring in MQLs, awareness is not your goal, right? MQLs is your purpose and goal, and you want to make sure they're aligned. And then finally, after all that, you get to, should we use AI for this or not? Is AI a good tool for this? So there's a couple different branches of AI. There's 3 of them, right? We have an acronym: find, organize, generate. Find is regression, machine learning. Organize is classification machine learning. And then generative is what we have today with ChatGPT. Generative works in things like language, like ChatGPT is phenomenal at language. There's image, video, and audio. Generally speaking, where a lot of people go wrong with AI is they try to have generative AI, particularly language models, do things that they're not good at, right? Language models, by definition, are bad at math. So you shouldn't have it to be doing math, because they can't. They can write code, and that code can do math, but they themselves can't do math very well. So the starting place is to sit down and audit all of the stuff that you have. We have a different framework called the TRIPS framework, and which you can, by the way, you can download for free on our website with not even a form to fill out. Go to trustinsights.ai/trips. You make a list of tasks, and you score them in 5 ways. Time, how much time does a task take? The more time it takes, the better a candidate is for AI. Repetitive, right? How repetitive is the task? The more repetitive, the better it's suited for AI. Important, how important is the task? The less important the task is, the better it is for AI, because it needs less human review, right? Like, hey, help me write my expense report. That is a task that should go to AI. The P stands for pleasant. How much do you enjoy the task? You should not give away the parts of your work that you actually enjoy, right? You should give away the parts of your work that you hate to AI. So the less you like it, the better candidate is for AI. And then finally, the S stands for sufficient data. How many examples do you have of the task? The more examples you have, the better suited it is for AI. So if you were to go through your workday or your team or your organization or your company and build out your processes, score them like this with this rubric, you can very quickly say, okay, here's the 5 candidates, like expense report completion, updating the CRM, all the things that just don't get done because no one wants to do them. That's your candidates for starting with AI. And if you don't have the skills in-house, then bring in external resources to help you do it. But that will show value, that will increase productivity, and it will make people happier, because you're not asking them to give up the things they're good at. You're asking them to give up the things they don't want to do, and everyone is on board for that.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll make sure we get links to all of this in the show notes, because that sounds fantastic. I'll be making sure the team at Content 10X go and take that, because we're always talking about that, like time and repetition and what do we enjoy doing. So it sounds like the fact that you have a framework would be really, really useful. So I'm sure it'll be useful for everyone listening as well. So I'll make sure to add the links to that. That was such a fantastic answer, so helpful. So thank you so much. Christopher, where would you like people to go to connect with you and let you know that they listened to this show and how valuable it was?
If you want more resources, the best place to go is trustinsights.ai. That's our website. You can find everything from there. There's a gazillion different places and things. Our frameworks are there. Most of our AI frameworks are free with not even a form to fill out, because we want people to learn these, to use these, to share these on their websites so that AI engines pick them up, multiple copies. Thank you. And so on and so forth.
Oh, that's amazing though. That's so, generous with such valuable and helpful information. So that's awesome to hear. So thanks so much. Well, make sure everyone goes there, and I'll add the links, like I said, so you can click in the show notes and go over to Trust Insights. Well, Christopher, thank you so much. It's been such an amazing conversation. Just really great to learn more. Thank you for your time. It's been great to have you on.
Thank you for having me.